On the afternoon of Sunday, September 18, 2022, dispatchers in Orange County, North Carolina, received a 911 call from a man riding an ATV on a remote utility easement road off Buckhorn Road near the town of Hillsborough. His voice was calm. He had been riding with friends when they came across something on the side of the road. We actually discovered 2 dead bodies. There's an access where the power company road ends. They're just laying on the side of the road. The caller told dispatchers he had gone home to get his father and was now driving back to wait for officers. He described the location. He answered every question asked of him. Within an hour, Orange County Sheriff's Office deputies confirmed what the caller had found. 2 bodies, 1 female, 1 male. Both appeared to have been shot multiple times. Investigators arrived to process a crime scene that would take nearly 4 years to fully reach a courtroom, and a verdict that left one family with no answer at all. You're watching Morbid True Crime, psychological true crime documentaries. Like, subscribe, and share for in-depth stories that uncover the mind behind the crime. Lyric Woods was 14 years old. She was a freshman at Cedar Ridge High School in Hillsborough, North Carolina, which sits in Orange County, roughly 20 miles east of Chapel Hill. Those who knew her described her as warm and social, the kind of teenager who hugged her parents goodnight and checked in with her family. Her mother, Elizabeth Kanata, later testified that on the evening of Friday, September 16, 2022, Lyric came behind her and gave her a hug. She told her parents she loved them and that she was going to take a shower. Elizabeth called after her not to take too long, because, she noted, Lyric always took really long showers. That was the last interaction Elizabeth Kanata had with her daughter.
And it was about 11 o'clock. Me and my husband were sitting on the couch. She came behind us, gave us both a hug, and told us she loved us and that she was going to take a shower. And I told her don't take an hour and a half because she always took really long showers. And that was the last time I saw her.
Devin Clark was 18 years old. He was a senior at Eastern Alamance High School in Morbid, North Carolina. He had turned 18 in May 2022, 4 months before his death. He was a football player. His mother, Tiffany Conception, described him as someone with a beautiful smile who was friendly and got along with everybody. His father, Dexter Clark Jr., described him as a young man who occasionally spent weekends at a shooting club where Dexter had introduced him to firearms safety.
I reported my firearm was missing because I know that usually Devin would, we would go shooting, and I let Devin, that was the gun that Devin did use when we went to go shooting. I was in a shooting club, Country Boys Therapy, and that's what we did on the weekends. And so Devin would shoot the gun there.
Lyric Woods and Devin Clark were not widely known to be friends prior to September 16, 2022. Their families were not connected. In fact, when Lyric's mother reached out to Lyric's social circle after her disappearance, none of her known friends seemed to know who Devin Clark was. The two had connected privately through Snapchat. Nothing about either of their backgrounds suggested what would follow. The third person in this story is Isia Mekki Ross. In September 2022, Ross was 17 years old. He had moved to North Carolina from out of state approximately a year earlier in 2021 and had transferred to Eastern Alamance High School, the same school Devin Clark attended. Clark's mother later confirmed that the two knew each other, but described the relationship as limited. Ross had only been at Eastern Alamance a matter of days before the events of September 16th. Ross lived in Morbid with his mother. He held jobs at 2 local businesses, Lowe's Foods and Bojangles. He did not have a driver's license. For transportation, he relied on others, including a man named Christian Sykes, who was an acquaintance and occasional ride. Ross's mother had a 2017 white GMC Terrain. Both the prosecution and defense would later confirm that Ross borrowed that vehicle on the night of September 16, 2022, despite not holding a valid license. In the days leading up to September 16th, there were no publicly documented incidents or communications flagged between any of the 3 parties. There were, however, messages. Investigators, using a search warrant on Lyric Wood's devices and a subsequent warrant to Snapchat for Devin Clark's account activity, were later able to reconstruct what was communicated during the 1 a.m. hour of September 17th. Technically, the early minutes of Saturday morning. Lyric sent Clark her home address and instructions on how to pick her up without being detected. She snuck out of her mother's house in Efland after midnight. Devin Clark sent messages earlier that night requesting Isaiah Ross join the plan. In a private Snapchat message, Clark asked Ross whether he had access to a car. The purpose of the request, according to testimony presented at trial and confirmed by multiple witnesses, was for Clark to have a location where he and Lyric could be alone together. Ross agreed to drive. He borrowed his mother's terrain and drove to Clark's house first. Ross testified that at the time, he believed more than one person would be picked up. He later said he understood that he was expected to wait outside while Clark and Woods spent time together. There was one additional element confirmed by both the prosecution and defense. The 9mm handgun used in the killings belonged to Devin Clark's father, Dexter Clark Jr. Dexter testified at trial that he had reported the firearm missing at some point prior to the incident, noting he had not seen it in 1 or 2 weeks. He did not know how it had left his possession. Both sides acknowledged at trial that the same 9mm was used to shoot both Lyric Woods and Devin Clark. The murder weapon was never recovered. It has not been found as of the time of this documentary. On the evening of Friday, September 16, 2022, the sequence of events began through a group Snapchat chat. Ross, Clark, and others were in the same messaging thread. Clark reached out to Ross privately, asking about the car. Ross confirmed he could use his mother's terrain. Shortly after midnight, now technically the early hours of Saturday, September 17th, Ross drove to Clark's home in Mebane and picked him up. Clark sat in the passenger seat. The two then drove toward Efland to pick up Lyric Woods, who had snuck out of her family's home and was waiting. She got into the back seat. Ross drove the vehicle toward a remote section of Buckhorn Road in rural Orange County. The road leads to a power company utility easement, an unpaved, isolated access point bordered by trees, with no nearby residences within direct line of sight. One neighbor, James Rogers, lived approximately 150 yards away. According to Ross's own testimony at trial, he stopped the vehicle along what he described as a rocky type of road and exited to give Clark and Woods privacy. He said he stepped away from the car and waited. At approximately 2 a.m. on September 17, 2022, James Rogers was woken by loud noises. He initially believed they were fireworks. He went back to sleep. Then, approximately 10 minutes later, he heard more of the same sounds. He did not immediately call police. The prosecution's theory, argued to the jury in closing statements by Assistant District Attorney Anna Orr, is that the delay Rogers described was not two separate events between different parties. It was, she argued, a single individual pausing between two sets of shootings, first targeting one victim, then returning to eliminate the second. Autopsy results confirmed that Devin Clark was shot 5 times. Lyric Woods was shot 7 times. Both victims had gunshot wounds in their backs. The medical examiner, Dr. Scott, testified that for Devin Clark the most significant injuries were to the back and neck, affecting 2 major vessels, with consequences described as exsanguination. Both victims were shot in the head, what the prosecution characterized as insurance shots. After the shooting, the vehicle left the scene. In the hours immediately following the shooting, Isaiah Ross drove south on Buckhorn Road. The vehicle needed gas. He stopped at the Petro Travel Center gas station, also located on Buckhorn Road, approximately 2 miles from the site where the bodies would later be found. Surveillance footage from the Petro Travel Center was later recovered by investigators and presented to the jury at trial. The footage, captured during the 2 a.m. hour of September 17, 2022, showed a white 2017 GMC Terrain arriving at the fuel pumps. The driver, identified by investigators through witness descriptions and social media photo comparisons as Ross, who had blonde hair at the time, exited the driver's seat and walked briefly toward the convenience store window to pay for gas. At one point, he appeared to open the driver's door and make a brief interaction with someone inside the car, though the exact nature of the interaction was not discernible from the footage. The footage also captured the vehicle slowly crashing into a pillar near the median while turning out of the station. The front bumper damage visible in that footage was consistent with damage later observed on Ross's mother's Terrain when investigators located the vehicle. After stopping for gas, Ross returned home. His mother observed the damage to her car. A heated exchange followed. She threw him out of the house. Ross told an acquaintance named Antwin Bryant, who was related to Devin Clark, that he almost died the previous night, as Bryant gave him a ride to a bus stop. Ross then contacted family members in Delaware and made arrangements to travel there. Before leaving the state, Ross placed a call to Christian Sykes. According to Sykes' testimony, that call came on Sunday, September 18th. The same afternoon, the ATV riders were finding the bodies. During a video call, Sykes said Ross held up a black handgun and indicated he had used it to cap 2 people. Ross told him the male victim had been pointing a laser-sighted gun at him. He described wrestling for the weapon. Sykes would later send Ross a direct Snapchat message asking about the 2 people he had shot. Ross responded with both victims' names and added, "Rest up," with an emoji.
So then I said, so then I was like, okay, and then he was like, but I capped him, and I was like, what you mean? And he was like, well, the dude was holding the beam on me, and I'm assuming he meant like the gun had like a laser type of thing on it, but he was like, he was pointing it at him. He was like, I don't like that, and I told him to stop, and I told him multiple times to stop, but he kept doing it, and he said the gun had bullets in it. And so he was like, I told him to stop. So then he said he grabbed the gun and they was wrestling with the gun. And then I'm assuming Devin was like had his finger and then he pulled the trigger, and he said that the bullet went like near his legs, like that way. He said in between his legs, but that's what he said. And then he said that he like got the gun from him, and then he said he shot him. And then he said that the white girl, well, he didn't say white girl, but he said the girl that was in the back seat, he said she saw everything, so I turned around and I shot her. Now, this is Sunday when he told me this. This is the next day, actually.
Ross was on a bus to Delaware by the time the bodies were formally identified. The Orange County Sheriff's Office began formally investigating on the afternoon of September 18, 2022, once the bodies were discovered and identified. Lyric Wood's family had already filed a missing persons report that morning after she was not found in her bedroom. Devin Clark's mother had separately contacted the National Crime Information Center after not hearing from her son since Friday night. The 2 families had not connected their concerns. Within a short time of beginning their investigation, detectives had identified a person of interest, Isia Mekki Ross. The problem was legal. Under North Carolina law at the time, because Ross was a minor, law enforcement could not publicly release his name, photograph, or any identifying information, not even to assist in locating him. For 17 days, investigators knew who they were looking for and could not say so publicly. This restriction would become the subject of legislative debate in the months that followed and would ultimately lead to statutory reform, but it did not help the investigation in September 2022. The investigation moved through several tracks simultaneously. Sheriff's investigators processed the crime scene, which included the unpaved utility easement road. Lead investigator Sergeant Zachary Baldwin described evidence at the scene in court, noting items consistent with the presence of a vehicle and confirmed shell casings. Luminol testing of the mother's terrain later revealed a large bright area consistent with biological material on the vehicle's interior roof. Investigator Keith Goodwin, the Sergeant of Criminal Investigation for the Orange County Sheriff's Office, obtained search warrants for Lyric Wood's devices, for Snapchat account data tied to Clark's username, and for phone carrier records associated with both Clark's and Ross's numbers. From those records, investigators reconstructed the digital timeline of the night of September 16, including the messages placing Lyric outside her home, Clark's communications requesting the ride, and the geographic positioning data from both phones as they moved from Mebane toward Buckhorn Road. The firearms analysis was conducted by Margaret LaSeneschal, a firearms examiner at the NC State Crime Lab. She examined shell casings, bullet fragments, and other projectile material recovered from the scene. The forensic conclusions confirmed that all rounds fired that night came from a single 9mm firearm, the same weapon acknowledged by both sides to be Devin Clark's father's missing handgun. Hair analysis and DNA testing were also conducted, producing a more complicated picture. Forensic scientist Evie Nguyen and DNA analyst Ivory both testified about evidence collected from the sexual assault kits taken from both victims. The DNA indicated that Clark and Woods had engaged in sexual activity consistent with their reason for being at the location. Ross's DNA was not present in those samples. No hair evidence similar to Ross or Clark was found in Lyric's sexual assault kit. No DNA from Ross was found in Clark's samples. The key break in identifying and locating Ross came from Christian Sykes, who contacted law enforcement after the video call in which Ross appeared to confess. A 2022 recorded interview of Sykes was played for the jury at trial. In it, Sykes described Ross's account. The male victim had a gun with a laser attachment and pointed it at Ross. Ross told the victim to stop. The third time, they wrestled for the weapon. Then, in Sykes's account, Ross stated that he shot them and dumped the bodies. That recorded statement also included a passage the prosecution would return to repeatedly. Sykes relayed that Ross described the girl in the back seat witnessing the shooting, and then said he turned around and shot her. On October 5, 2022, 17 days after the bodies were found, agents from the FBI Violent Crimes Task Force located Isaiah Ross at an apartment in Dover, Delaware. He was arrested. 2 women at the apartment were also arrested for hindering prosecution. Ross was returned to North Carolina and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Because he was 17 at the time of the alleged crimes, Ross was not eligible for the death penalty. He would, however, be tried as an adult. The 17-day gap between identifying a suspect and being able to say so publicly drew direct attention from North Carolina lawmakers. The Orange County Sheriff's Office could not issue a name, a photograph, or a public alert because the suspect was a juvenile, and state law at the time prohibited it regardless of the severity of the alleged offense. In 2023, the North Carolina legislature passed a statute that became known as Lyric and Devin's Law. The law established specific conditions under which a juvenile suspect's identity, including their first and last name, photograph, alleged offenses, and the level of threat they pose, could be released publicly. Those conditions include the requirement that the juvenile be accused of at least one offense that could be prosecuted in Superior Court, the same court that handles adult felony cases. The law bearing the names of both victims was signed before Isaiah Ross ever stood trial. Its practical effect would be felt in future cases, not this one. The trial of Isaiah Mekhi Ross formally began on January 12, 2026, 3 years and nearly 4 months after the deaths of Lyric Woods and Devin Clark. Ross was 21 years old. On January 12th, he rejected a plea offer that would have reduced both charges from first-degree murder to second-degree murder, with a minimum of 20 to 25 years per charge. He offered no counteroffer. The case proceeded to trial. Jury selection concluded on January 14th. 12 jurors and 3 alternates were seated. Opening statements were completed in under 15 minutes. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Anna Orr, argued that Ross drove Woods and Clark to a remote location with premeditated intent, shot both of them multiple times, and fled the state. The prosecution's theory for motive presented in closing arguments was that a disagreement arose because Ross believed he would have sex with Woods after Clark, but that Woods refused. ADA Orr noted that no evidence presented at trial confirmed Woods was aware of any such expectation, or that Clark had made any such arrangement. Orr suggested that when Woods told Clark she would not go along with what was being proposed, a confrontation followed, and that Ross responded with lethal force. The defense, led by attorney Jonathan Trapp, presented a different account. Trapp told the jury that a separate argument broke out between Clark and Woods, that Clark shot Woods, and that when the gun was then turned on Ross, Ross wrestled it away and fired in self-defense. The defense's position was stated plainly in opening. The person who shot Lyric Woods was not Mr. Ross, it was Devin Clark. The prosecution's witnesses included the ATV riders who found the bodies, the parents of both victims, the lead investigators, the firearms examiner, DNA analysts, the forensic scientist, the neighbor who heard the gunshots, and Christian Sykes. The defense called a single witness, Isaiah Ross himself. Investigators presented surveillance footage from the Petro Travel Center on Buckhorn Road, captured during the 2 a.m. hour of September 17th. The footage showed the white terrain arriving, the driver, identified through hair color and build as consistent with Ross, paying for gas and briefly returning to the driver's door, and the car then slowly striking a pillar while leaving. The front bumper damage seen in the footage matched the damage subsequently observed on Ross's mother's vehicle. The prosecution played a 2022 recorded interview in which Christian Sykes described the content of his video call with Ross. Sykes said Ross acknowledged having shot 2 people. In the most direct passage of that recording, Sykes relayed Ross's account. The girl in the back seat saw everything, so he turned around and shot her. On the stand in 2026, Sykes testified consistently that Ross told him he had capped 2 people, though some details between his 2022 recorded statement and his courtroom testimony differed on specifics. The defense pressed him on those differences. Sykes maintained the core of his account. The prosecution introduced Snapchat messages sent by Ross to a group chat that included both himself and Clark, sent after the shooting. One message, time-stamped at 3:52 a.m. on September 17, 2022, showed Ross tagging Clark's account and complaining about not having a car, describing himself as slump, which Ross testified meant sleeping. On cross-examination, ADA Orr pointed out that Ross, who acknowledged sending the messages, was tagging a person he claimed was already dead by that hour. Ross testified that he did not recall sending those specific messages, but evidently sent them. Autopsy results confirmed both Clark and Woods sustained gunshot wounds to their backs. The prosecution argued this was fundamentally inconsistent with Ross's account of facing down an armed attacker in a direct confrontation. ADA Orr described the final shots to the heads of both victims as insurance shots, taken after the 2 were already on the ground. In closing, she told the jury, "Stories change, evidence doesn't." Ross testified that after hearing gunshots outside the car, he saw Clark holding a gun. He said Clark threatened him. He told the jury he went for the weapon out of desperation, that he wrestled it away, and that when Clark punched him in the torso, he fired. Asked how many times he shot Clark, Ross said, "I just pointed and squeezed." He testified he did not check either victim's pulse afterward, but that they appeared dead. He said he was shocked and didn't want to believe what was happening. He denied telling Sykes that he killed both Woods and Clark, and denied showing Sykes a gun on the video call. Ross also acknowledged throwing Clark's bag, Clark's phone, and the gun out of the car window between the crime scene and the gas station. Neither the gun nor Clark's phone has been recovered. Separate from the courtroom proceedings, public attention during the trial focused on social media posts made by Ross's mother. Those posts were shared widely in local online communities and drew significant criticism from observers who interpreted them as dismissive of the gravity of the trial and of Devin Clark's death. The posts were not introduced as evidence at trial and had no direct bearing on the verdict, but they became a secondary point of public discussion throughout the proceedings.
My child is so bad. She's like, no. I mean, damn, I said sorry to, Devin's mom and her little ugly ass ragamuffin looking ass bitches came like, ugh. But, this country boy therapy, so that's what we do, country boy therapy.
On January 29, 2026, after more than 4 days of deliberations, the jury sent a note to Judge Stephanie Reese. They had reached a unanimous verdict on one charge. They were deadlocked on the other, split 8-4, with the foreperson confirming that no additional time would change that outcome. Isaiah Ross was found guilty of second-degree murder in the death of Devin Clark. The jury was unable to reach a verdict in the death of Lyric Woods. Judge Reese declared a mistrial on that count. Before reading the sentence, Judge Reese addressed the courtroom. "This is an extremely horrific situation. All of these young people. She acknowledged the jury's effort. She instructed those present that any reaction to the verdict, in either direction, would result in removal by the bailiff. Ross was sentenced to a minimum of 241 months and a maximum of 300 months in prison, equivalent to approximately 20 to 25 years, for the second-degree murder of Devin Clark. It was the same sentence range he had been offered in the plea deal he rejected 2 weeks earlier. Ross immediately indicated his intent to appeal the conviction. The Orange County District Attorney's Office stated its intent to retry the case with respect to Lyric Woods. A scheduling hearing was set for March 2026. Tiffany Concepcion, Devin Clark's mother, spoke after the verdict. At the end of the day, I am not able to hear my child's voice. Him and Lyric were taken, and him and Lyric were taken for no cause, no reason. As of the recording of this documentary, the case of Lyric Woods remains unresolved in a court of law. Lyric Woods snuck out of her house after midnight on a Friday night. She left a home where her mother had just hugged her. She got into a car with a boy she liked, driven by someone she may not have known at all. Devin Clark got into the same car. He was 18 years old. He had taken a gun from his father's belongings without his father's knowledge. Whatever happened on that utility easement road, whatever sequence of decisions or confrontations or intentions led to the outcome, 2 people were dead before 3 a.m. A jury of 12 people, presented with the same set of confirmed facts, was able to agree unanimously about one of those deaths. About the other, 4 of them held a position the remaining 8 could not move. What remains is a record of confirmed actions and the decisions that preceded them. In cases like this, understanding those decisions is often the only clarity left behind. Thank you for watching Morbid True Crime. If this story made you think, consider liking the video, subscribing, and sharing it, because understanding the crime is how we prevent the next one.